Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So, folks, there are difficult weeks, and then there are especially difficult weeks. I think we can all agree that this has been an especially difficult week. And I want to begin with Torah, and I'll end with Torah. The Torah holds out the promise that for the children of Israel, V'natati shalom ba'aretz, I will bring peace to the land, u'shechavtem be'ein machrid, and you'll be able to dwell there, and nobody will make you afraid. So that's the concept, that's the aspiration, that a member of the children of Israel will be able to exist without being made to be afraid, will be able to exist in security and in peace. And we know, of course, that on Wednesday evening, a couple, Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram, were murdered by a man who was yelling "Free Palestine," murdered in a very intentional and very forthright way. They were murdered as they were leaving the Capitol Jewish Museum, following a gathering for young diplomats sponsored by the American Jewish Committee. They were working for the Israeli embassy. And the person who killed them, Elias Rodriguez, told the officer upon being apprehended that he had done this for Palestine, for Gaza. I want to share some thoughts about the nature of this crime as I see it. And I also want to share a story from our tradition that helps us to think more deeply about what all of this might mean. To begin with, this was a crime against humanity. This couple was about to get engaged. The young man, later it was discovered, had a ring that he was taking with him and his soon-to-be, he had hoped, fiancée to Israel. He was going to propose to her in Jerusalem. So two human beings were gunned down in cold blood. A young couple about to be engaged will now be eulogized and buried. And I would like to think that any decent human being, whatever your background, whatever your cluster of identifications, would recognize this as a crime against humanity. Secondly, this is a crime against the Jewish people. And much was written about the identity of the young man. It turns out he has a Jewish father and a Christian mother, identified closely with his Christian faith. And some said that while he was working for a Jewish organization, he identified with the Jewish people. But it seems pretty clear that the person who murdered them thought that he was killing two Jewish people leaving a Jewish event, who had a strong connection of the state of Israel, which probably in his mind also increased them as targets for his murder. And furthermore, it's a crime against sanity. It's a crime against logic. This person claimed that what he was doing was on behalf of Palestine, on behalf of Gaza. I spoke shortly after October 7th about Chaim Katzman, who was the first cousin of one of my son's closest childhood friends. And Chaim worked on behalf of Israeli-Palestinian reconciliation, and he died literally in a closet, using his body to protect the bullets from killing a woman and her child. And these two individuals, we now know, were advocates on behalf of finding paths of reconciliation between Jews and Palestinians. And it turns out that the keynote panel that was taking place at the event that they were leaving featured individuals discussing how better to expand humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip. So you tell me what was even remotely logical and sensible about this murder. The murderer removed from this earth two people who are trying to help. In Israel, certain politicians are blaming each other, pointing fingers from the right to the left and from the left to the right and saying, this is because of your policies, and this is because of what you tweeted recently. Newsflash, Jews have been killed and Israelis have been targeted, no matter whether the government is presided over by somebody on the right or somebody on the left. People who want to kill us don't care what our ideology is, and it grieves me on top of the tragedy of the situation when we turn against each other instead of recognizing that we need to gather our resources to face a common enemy. Right now, there's a lot of tension within Israeli society about what Israel should do, about how Israel should continue to act vis-a-vis Gaza and vis-a-vis the hostages. And some of the families of the hostages believe that the Israeli government is not doing enough. And they have said so loudly. Israelis are not shy. God bless them. There is a great deal of criticism of the Israeli government and by the Israeli government, but none of that, and here is where clarity is called for, none of that diminishes the extraordinary primary blame that Hamas bears for all of this suffering. The suffering of Israelis and also the suffering of Palestinians, which is all part of their strategy. And none of this can in any possible way exonerate walking up to an unarmed couple and gunning them down. And for anybody who thinks that what happened on Wednesday night is a result of anything that the Israeli government has recently done, I want to remind you that right after October 7th, before Israel even entered Gaza, there were extraordinarily brazen statements that were made and acts that were taken, acts of anti-Semitism that basically blamed Israel for being victims on October 7th. What our enemies are trying to do has nothing to do with what we do. It has nothing to do whether we lean right or we lean left. It has nothing to do with how we present ourselves in the world. And once again, we are asked to, forced to learn this lesson. It's a mitzvah to be self-reflective. We can always ask ourselves, what can we do differently? What can we do better? That is true for us as individuals. That is true for us as a nation. Self-reflection, cheshbon hanefesh, is an essential part of what it means to be a Jew. But it is not a mitzvah to tie yourself into a pretzel, blaming yourself for the heinous acts of our enemies. And for those who do that, I urge you to stop. This is not about what we did. This is about who we are. This is about people wanting to remove us from this earth by virtue of who we are. And all of that continues to be reinforced each time something like this happens. So I now want to share a story. And I believe that this story will give us some insight into how we might continue to move forward. So the story takes place during Roman occupation, first centuries of the Common Era. And there was a rabbi, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, and he said something that the Roman leadership found insulting. And so they said, as punishment, we are going to put you and your son to death. And so Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai and his son, Rabbi Elazar, took refuge in a cave. And they lived in the cave for a year. And then at the end of the year, turns out the emperor of Rome died, and they thought that they were safe and it was time to come out of the cave. And so they emerged from the cave. And after they emerged, they saw that people were planting crops. And it turns out that Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Elazar were angry at these people. They said, how dare they engage in this worldly matters when they need to be worried about things that are more important, about the study of Torah. And they were so angry that their gaze actually caused fires to occur. They destroyed parts of the world with their angry, righteous gaze. And a voice emerged, a bat kol, and said, "Did you leave the cave to destroy my world? Go back to the cave." More time elapsed, and I'll get to the end of the story in a few moments. Our ancestors were aware of the dangers of righteous anger. Our ancestors were aware that people who think that ideas are more important than individuals are going to do harm. There is a danger in thinking that what you are doing is righteous and I don't care who I have to harm in order to advance my cause. The murderer claimed he was helping Palestine. He claimed that he was helping Gaza. He was so blind to the realities that he killed two humans who were trying to help Palestine, trying to help Gaza, but it wasn't about logic. He miscalculated badly because he was consumed by his own righteous anger. Everyone is capable of righteous anger. Jews are capable of it, people of all religions, all backgrounds, all walks of life, and we have been on the receiving end of righteous anger for generations. So how do you cure it? How do you cure the righteous anger that sees human beings as fodder for ideas, which is the most un-Jewish thing you can do? So here's the end of the story. The two of them come out after another 12 months. And everywhere that Rabbi Elazar would look angrily, his father, Rabbi Yochanan, would heal. So Rabbi Elazar would attack, and his father would bring healing. And his father said, you know what? Together, we are bringing a good energy into the world. Together, we are engaged in the proper study and implementation of Torah. Rabbi Shimon, the father, he took his son's righteous anger and he tempered it with healing. He was the yin to his son's yang. He was the water to his son's fire. The father and the son are told to remove themselves from society, but the end of the story tells us it's okay to be passionate. It is okay to try to create positive change, but you have to do that with healing. You can't do that with destruction. We need less righteous anger and more righteous healing. The Hamas death cult is responsible for the deaths of Jews and the deaths of Palestinians. And the only tiny, tiny seed of possible good news that I am seeing right now is that there are residents of Gaza who are protesting against Hamas and saying, enough. They haven't apologized for what Hamas did to Israelis, so far as I know. But they are certainly upset that they are on the receiving end of Hamas's destruction. And so maybe that's the beginning of a seed of hope. Who knows? I just want to conclude by saying the following. I ask that we hold up the lives of Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram as models of righteous healing. That's what they stood for. You see a picture of this couple and you cannot help but be moved. These are idealistic people. These people were looking forward to a life together that would not just be a blessing for themselves, but a blessing for the Jewish people and a blessing, quite frankly, for humanity. They are models of the kinds of righteousness that sows rather than burns, righteousness that builds rather than destroys. And I pray that in their memory, Jews the world over will one day be able to live in security and peace in Israel, in the nation's capital, wherever we are, wherever we presume simply to exist in the world. Ve'ein machrid, and nobody will act towards us in a way that we don't deserve. That we, like all human beings, will be able to live and love and make the world a little bit better without anyone making us afraid. Shabbat Shalom.